So I'm so excited to be here. I get to share with you work that I've been doing now for since 2009. And my background, real quickly, my PhD is in educational psychology, and I am a scientist practitioner by training. And I got my start as a school psychologist in a really large public school system, county system in Virginia. Fairfax County Public Schools, anybody know them? Large. And so the story I like to tell quickly is I was an itinerant school psychologist. So I had the same building that I went to on like Monday and Wednesday, and then a second building, the same building I'd go to on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And Friday rotated through like special education eligibility processes where I was chairing those processes. Any kind of crisis, issues that would come up, we would do a lot of administrative kind of catch-in and planning, interdisciplinary work on Fridays. And now I was fresh out of my clinical work at Johns Hopkins. So this was like a dream come true for me to be in that school system, to be hired on without a lot of on-the-ground experience. I knew that this was awesome. They believed in me, I believed in them. And what I found very quickly, though, very, very quickly, is depending on the building I entered in the morning, I was either that amazing school psychologist who got stuff done, who got people planning and communicating together. We were problem-centered, right? We knew what we needed to do. We had the communication, right? We had the mindset in the building. It's sort of like, where's Debra? Go find her, right? And then Tuesdays, I'd get up, do my hair, I'm excited, get in my car, get myself there, way on time. Very different building. Are you feeling me? Okay. No matter what day of the week, I would end the day walking to the parking lot, totally exhausted, as we are as educators, mission-based work. But depending on the building, I was either also completely exhausted and completely demoralized, or I was completely exhausted and exhilarated. You know what I'm talking about, right? So that's where I need you to come up for a second, right? Been doing these deep, deep dives so far on class and these beautiful behavioral indicators and these dimensions of teacher practice, right? To me, to the education world, two things better than sliced bread. The class, because it took something so precious up until then, right? Precious. Took things like, oh, she's magical. He's a magical teacher. Right? And it demystified that. And it said there are true dimensions of pedagogical practice that we can unpack together, right? We can go see them. And you and I, we can all go see the same interaction and come out with similar understandings around a core set of basic general pedagogical practices, right? Great gift, great gift. The second great gift I want to introduce you to today came from K-12. Oh. Now remember, you already like me, and I too am an interloper from K-12, okay? So stay with me. Not all scary bad things come from K-12, right? Okay. Where is this? Over here? All right, we're going to do it the old manual way. Look at that. All right. So today what I want to do is help us discover new ways of thinking about the dynamics of improvement. Okay? The class is a lens and a language that really helps us at that teacher-child curriculum level, right? Now what I want us to do is entertain the conditions surrounding the classroom. That's why you're here. You saw leadership, you saw our organizational conditions, right? So we're going to talk through this framework and what the research has taught us about it's not an either or. We're all in this room because we know it's both. It's what happens within the classrooms with children, between teachers and adults and children, and among the content, the curriculum, the environment, the children and the adults, right? But we also know that things surround teachers and teaching. We also know that organizational conditions surround family engagement and family provider interactions in our buildings and in our home visiting programs, right? So we're going to explore those things. I'm going to share with you a framework that has over 20 years of research behind it in K-12. And my work, my personal work, and my organization's work to translate that and bring that to early childhood. We're going to define and explore some instructional leadership and new ways of thinking about professional learning, right? How many of you are familiar with the term job-embedded professional learning or practice-based coaching, right? Job-embedded coaching. Should we keep going with these terms? But what I want you to entertain is they all have one very important thing in common. Whatever you call it, it is the frequency and the regularity of it on real, true problems of practice I'm having today, not ones you're having in your classroom 100 miles away. Right now, me, with my peers in this building, these children. Right? So job-embedded professional learning, that's the single differentiator. It is communities of practice acting on problems of practice that are actually occurring moment to moment in my building, in my home visiting program. Right? Okay, and then we're going to reflect on our own practices and strengths and opportunities. I want you to think of a time you observed excellent teaching. Think of a time very recently. I don't care if it has to be by video. Think of a time, and I want you to identify what you saw and what you heard. Right? Now, usually, I have to get to all the class dimensions. Right? I have to do this from the perspective of pulling class out of people. But you were at a Class Interact Summit. So what I want you to do is think one level beyond it. For you to have observed that amazing teacher-child interaction, now I want you to identify what everything surrounding that teacher and that classroom, what was going on? Just round table, what are some thoughts? What was surrounding that teacher's ability to have that excellent teaching moment that you've observed?
Ability to have a small group.
Ability to have a small group, because not all small groups created equal, is it? Right. What else?
Relationships between the teachers in the room and teachers and children.
The relationships? Oh, there it is.
Just relationships.
What does administrator-teacher relationship have to do with excellent teaching in the classroom?
Pretty much everything. The strength, the support, the ability to carry out things that are learned in training and coaching and so on.
Huh. How many agree with that? Juan, you were shaking your head fast and furiously. Want to add to that? It's perfect. You said you're perfect.
It goes with the discretion, right? Because it goes with the discretion that is allowed for that teacher to have the discretion to use materials that will enhance the lesson or the questions at that time. Or knowing different strategies that they can, with the buying with the principal in that relationship, they can use the discretion to be flexible in their classroom with their students.
This is smart group. Other hands were up. No? Did you hear it?
Well, I didn't, but we both came up with the same person, and it was a director of a program that we worked with. And the classrooms that we thought of might not have been the same classroom, but it was the same administrator.
Holy moly, look at that natural experiment. Different classrooms, and when you traced it back out, the administrator was in common. All right, other thoughts on this? What surrounded that teacher in that teaching moment that made it excellent? Other thoughts on what is surrounding it? What about the classroom team? Right, maybe this only happens in Chicago, but like dysfunctional classroom teaming. That's why I'm glad I have some clinical psychology background. I have a lot to say about that, but that's another session. But some of what I'm going to talk about today affects that. But think about that. So there are certain administrator reactions in the face of teams that are struggling socially, interpersonally, right? And some of those reactions are not at all about autonomy and discretion and focusing on the work. Some of those reactions are just as juvenile, right? And disregard continuity of care for young children by breaking up teams, right? Okay. So we've all seen this, I think. This is just to remind us that right now we continue in this country to have too many vulnerable kids. Dual language, kids with special needs, kids living in multi-stressed communities, showing up for kindergarten almost 15 points behind their better resourced peers. So I want you to think about starting a race 15 miles behind. So you're going to start a marathon, because that's what education is. It's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. And you're gonna show up 15 miles back. And then you're gonna try to catch up to our number one runner. Is that ever gonna be, right? So I say that because, again, coming from K-12, a lot of times we play the blame game in education, right? Oh, well, if they did this, and why can't they catch them up? Right, all that stuff, right? The thing is, you only can get a year of learning for a year of teaching. So we have to figure out excellence at each and every level, grade of education, right? Because we have to set the next teacher up to optimize what he or she can do in the year they have, right? Okay. So this is pretty scary. This is the difference between sort of think of it as maybe a child who would qualify for Head Start over here, and higher income children from higher income families and communities. It's a very big gap, right? And that's in math and reading. And then we can look at national class scores. All right, every time I show this, there are two thoughts I have. When you look at this, what's your positive thought? Shout it out.
At or above the threshold is positive. Results at or above the threshold.
What about emotional supports here? Huh? What about those organizational supports? Mm-hmm. And I want to remind us that in organizational supports is instructional learning formats. Oh, that's hard stuff, right? That's the advanced organizer. That's the knowledge of the early learning standards, right? Knowledge of child development in terms of how you're making that learning opportunity an opportunity and not some teacher-directed mechanical procedural thing, right? So instructional learning formats is in organizational supports. What about our instructional supports here? It's pretty sad, right? What I want you to attend to here is these three graphs have looked like this for 4 years. We are stagnant at improving instructional supports in this country. Stagnant. So I want us to be proud of the improvement that we've been able to realize more at scale, as indicated by these programs, in emotional support and organizational supports. But when you have graphs that look exactly the same, the distribution looks the same, year over year over year over year, that's the definition of stagnation and improvement. All right, so stay with me on that thought. So I'm not talking status. You know, the one time I got a 4.1 on instructional supports. I'm talking about as a field of early childhood. We are stagnant with what? Improvement in instructional supports. Improvement is what we're after. A trajectory forward, positive, right? Maybe today it was a 1.7. Where is it 3 months from now? Is it a 1.78? Guess what? I'm jumping up and down. I'm going home at the end of the day exhausted and not demoralized. That's, say it with me, improvement. Say it with me, improvement. That's why you're sitting in this session, because it's not about status. It's about what do we need to do and think differently about, oh geez, I get so excited. We're going to learn from others for a second. Organizational conditions really matter. Here's what we find. Every sector of education has focused at length on what's called the technical core. The teaching, the learning, the family engagement, right? The technical core. What do you see in this iceberg, though? It's everything below the surface that we're finding really matters and predicts future improvement, future performance. You can take a class observation today. You can take an Ecker's observation today, an ITER's observation today, an ELCO observation today, whatever homegrown tool you want today, and it's a snapshot of today, right? What I'm going to introduce to you are organizational conditions that predict, literally predict the future state of whether or not an educational setting is on a trajectory to improve practice. Wouldn't you like to know that? Wouldn't you like to know that? And don't you want to know what they are? Right? Here they are. Now remember, the language I'm giving you is we have to pay attention to everything that surrounds teachers and teaching, practitioners and practice. Here's what they found. This was 18 years. This is longitudinal research in the city of Chicago. Now, yes, that's urban, but it is incredibly diverse. Incredibly diverse. Do we have 100% low socioeconomic status? No. We've got thriving communities economically in some areas. We have massive rates of dual language, and not just Spanish. Polish is the second language in the city of Chicago. So what's important here, and this is what I want you to follow with me. In the city of Chicago, they passed massive legislation in the beginning of the 80s that basically said, we're throwing our hands up at the central office with how to improve the situation. They've had federal lawsuits, civil rights all sorts of lawsuits, right? And basically they threw their hands up and said, to your point, Yvette, okay, schools, you have full autonomy to fix yourselves at the building level. So what do you think ensued? Buildings that did fix themselves, and what? Buildings that stagnated. Exactly. She said it with me over here. This is great. All right. So here were the 5 organizational conditions that mattered, that literally differentiated between schools that were on a trajectory of improvement from schools that were on a trajectory of stagnation. And here it is. See the classroom in the corner? Yes. That is the microcosm of teachers with children with curriculum with interactions. 100%. But everything that surrounds it that mattered, how collaborative the teachers were. And it's not, and again, this is not like, oh, she's a collaborative human being and this one's not. It's the opportunity to come together to collaborate on the work, okay? Ambitious interactions and instruction. We're all at a class conference. Do you love the sound of that? You could translate classroom assessment scoring system for general pedagogical practices that result in ambitious interactions and instruction. When you walk into a classroom that has content going on, right? Lillian Katz, says that we must respect and understand that every second of information and time we spend with young children needs to be worthy of their time, right? That's an ambitious classroom. All right. Combined with supportive child and family-centered environments, right? This is the high expectations because of worth. This is high expectations that you are 3 and your brain is firing on more neurons and at a faster rate than my brain as your teacher. That's the reality of the brain science, right? So under supportive environments, it's the deep respect for the potential. It's the high expectations combined with the beautiful age and developmentally appropriate supports, the emotional supports, right? All right, and then we got our engaged families. Not involved families, engaged families. How many of you know the difference? You can involve families, and then you can involve and engage them, right? When these supports were strong, it was about engagement of families in their own process of supporting the child's learning, in sharing valuable information with teachers about who that kid is, their pet peeves, their temperaments, everything what? Below the surface. Right? All right, and look at this. All of it was driven by 2 things. It was driven by effective leadership, instructional leadership, leaders who, like teachers, had time to focus on the work of their centers and schools. So if the work of their centers and schools is making sure they're compliant with 595 individual things, they weren't on the trajectory of improvement. The kind of leadership here was 25% of their time every week focusing on partnering with teachers, giving guidance about the technical core, right? And so that combined with relational trust and strong professional community. This data is so powerful. The research is so powerful. This is what they found. What you're looking at here is math in the red bars and reading achievement in the yellow bars. And schools, this is over 465 schools in this data. 465 individual pre-K to 8th grade schools. And what you see is when schools who were weak in 3 out of those 5 things, right? 3 out of the 5 essentials, not a single school improved achievement in mathematics. Holy, right? Not a single one of those nearly 500 schools, if they were weak on 3 out of 5 of those essentials I just shared with you, they got nowhere in mathematics and just a little bump in reading. Now go all the way to the other side with me. Look at what happened to improvement in math and reading achievement when the school was strong on 3 out of 5 of these essential supports. This, by the way, is a 10 times more likely to improve than these buildings. So remember I said this is not about static. This is not about the picture today. The strength of these conditions predict who will improve achievement over time from who will not be improving achievement over time. Are we buying the power of these things? I mean, we're the social sciences. We don't get statistics like 10 times more likely in anything. I mean, I can't even tell you statistically what we say is significant and, 10 times more likely. If you had a student, are you going to want to know what buildings look like this? That's what you want to know. Because I'll tell you something else. Some of these buildings who were over here were on the same watch list as these buildings, okay? So like take a snapshot in 1987. Your and my school were both on the watch list about annual yearly progress. But this is what you wanted to know, right? It doesn't matter that we're both on the watch list. What matters is, are we strongly organized to improve ourselves? Am I convincing you? I love it. I love it. I can't sell anything but what I believe in, by the way. All right, so here's two things. One, usually early childhood folks, so I told you I've been doing this since 2009, will say to me, which ones what do I do, right? And you said if they were strong on 3 out of the 5, which 3? Aren't these great questions? You're all a bunch of researchers. I love it. Okay, but here's the deal, folks. Teaching is the most complex work on the planet, second only to leading it. And just like teaching, you can't just do emotional supports. You can't just do organizational supports. You can't just do instructional supports, right? You got to do them all. And what we find with the essentials, the organizational conditions, is that they're interdependent, right? So if I strengthen one, there's a beautiful positive effect on the others, but they all are interdependent. They are all necessary. They're all essential. Here's a caution, though, and this is a really important caution in early childhood. Back to these people. Okay, over here. A sustained weakness in even one of the 5 essentials over time, right? Sustained. Relegated the likelihood of an improvement initiative succeeding to less than 12%. Let me say that again. So, I have a building. And I have a sustained weakness. So I'm going to go on the positive side of this graph, right? But there's still a difference between these two buildings. So of the 5, if I have a sustained weakness in one of them, year over year over year, and then I try, so now we're going to switch to like tools of the mind curriculum, or we're gonna dial up, our PD around the class, or we're gonna whatever improvement PD initiative. That one organizational weakness enters enough chaos that the likelihood of your improvement initiative being successful is less than 12%. Okay, so now we all need to exhale. So we got to get on this stuff, right? And we are the people to do it, because you're here, and research matters to you. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want to dial into the most important things. I want to read you a quote, and then we're going to interact on this quote. I feel like it's empowering, So this is a teacher. So I've been acting on these essential supports in 2 ways. One is by creating a professional learning initiative, a model of professional learning for instructional leaders. And it helps them concentrate on 2 of these essentials in order to strengthen the others. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The other way that I've been operating on the 5 essentials is information on them is captured through teacher surveys. How easy is that? There's no direct observation, oh my God, 3 hours, oh my God, right? No, it's literally a survey that teachers and practitioners in a building, in a program, take. And I've created that survey for early childhood. So it's reliable and valid in early childhood. And we created a parent survey. Wouldn't you love to know what parents think about the whole program? not just their interactions, but like other things that they can, from their perspective, report on in terms of these 5 essentials. So this is a teacher who was involved in both of my projects. She was involved in helping us shape the items on the teacher and parent survey through content expertise, and she was in our instructional leadership development initiative, where we were R&Ding our model of developing instructional leadership that's based on the 5 essentials. And here's what she says. This is a year and a half after her leadership team from her building were participating with us. How do I calibrate as an instructional leader to these 5 essentials, right? How do I go strengthen everything that surrounds teaching? And here's what she says. I feel like it's empowering, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to be listening for the 5 essentials. Should I remind you what they are? Okay. Here you go. Instructional leadership. Pedagogically based vision, not compliance-based vision. That's not inspiring. What's inspiring is a pedagogically based, child development-based vision. Something that, teachers want to talk about. And you get to the compliance through the inspiring conversation, right? So pedagogically based vision, very important here. That galvanizes relationships, this relational trust, right? You've got teachers collaborating with each other on problems of practice and lesson planning, designing instruction, looking at child data, looking at the class data, right? They are creating ambitious interactions and instruction in their classrooms. They're coming back and reflecting on that. They're working with families. They got engaged families in that building. Engaged with them as teachers and practitioners, and those families engage with their children in developmentally powerful ways, right? Child and family supportive environments. So the 5, leadership, supportive environments, collaborating teachers, engaged families, and ambitious instruction. So now I want you to listen for these in this teacher's description of the setting in which she works. I feel like it's empowering, when it's not just from the top down, when it's right here, and we believe in this stuff, and I have something to share, and it's valued by my administrator. Your colleagues also buy in, and you have that energy. Listen to this, and you have that love. And then you have an administrator that pushes you in that way and supports you and guides you and nudges you a bit farther. I think it's kind of what we try to do with our students too. Now, even when they're only 3. So I think she leads by example for sure. Do you hear the essentials? Let's go back. What did you hear? Shout it out. Collaboration. Ambitious, a vision. Keep going. Leadership, supportive environments, not just for children and families. The love, she says. What else? What other essential did you hear?
Collaborative teachers. Did you say that?
It is possible, my friends. It is absolutely possible. And doesn't that sound like a place you'd want to show up to work at? I mean, love. Now I want you to turn at your tables. Please try and include everybody. So it's not necessarily a turn and talk, but more of a small group. And I want you to think about, how do these essential supports relate to your work? Oh, and I'm at 15 minutes. When we come back from this, we're going to watch a video, okay? So which essential support do you think is the strongest typically? You go across programs. And which essential support seems to be the hardest to find it strong and in place? Go ahead and have that conversation. I'm going to set up for the video. Which essentials tend to be typically very weak? Engaged families.
I didn't hear the question.
Which essentials typically tend to be more weak than others? Leadership. What else? Ambitious instruction. What else? So typically weak. You go building to building to building to building. What else? Families, heard families a couple times? Okay. So here's what I'm going to give you some language around. Leadership, in fact, is proven to be the driver. So if leadership, in the 18-year study, what the researchers, and I'll give you the book reference and everything, what the researchers found is that they were unable, after 18 years, to come up with an example of a single elementary school, pre-K to 8th grade, that improved itself when the instructional leadership was sustained and weak over time. So remember back to that whole thing about a sustained weakness in one of them? But guess what? The data on this one, it is impossible to improve when instructional leadership remains weak. Do you want to know the next one?
Collaborative teachers?
Woohoo! Yes. Here's the deal. What that research found in 18 years is that the way teachers collaborate, the discourse, the conversation, the support, the constantly coming back and saying, how did you do it? I'm going to try that. That worked for you? That didn't work for me. Why do you think that? Discourse, conversation, use of data collaboratively. That turns out to be a far better predictor of quality improvement than any single teacher characteristic or school quality characteristic. All right, so the professional development model that I created and that I R&D'd, had the privilege of R&D'ing through an Investing in Innovation grant. Here's the hypotheses. Children who participate in early ed programs that are strong, that have these strong and sustained essential supports, will enter kindergarten with the learning approaches, skills, and knowledge that will set them up for success, right? All through, at least through 3rd grade, right? And that leaders and teachers who are supported by an integrated, effective professional learning system, so now I am talking about your states, right? The system that includes routine opportunities for job-embedded learning, those are the keys to improvement. So I'm going to play you a video, and you're going to hear some of our leaders who were transformed towards the 5 essentials. They're equipped with knowledge of the 5 essentials and what happened in their thinking about improvement and what they needed to do for their teachers.
Well, before, in the past, it was really, going to workshops and then coming back and either like presenting like at a staff meeting or, sharing with a co-teacher and maybe making copies of the handouts and sharing with everybody, and hoping that you would maintain it and, like you came back with all these really great ideas. But if no one else seen like the benefit, it's kind of fizzled out and it wouldn't really go anywhere. So that's how it used to be.
Professional development is a process. It's a continuous, ongoing process. It's not a one-time event that occurs and you expect practices to be improved. So not only can we send them to a training, we can then come alongside them and observe the practice and use the team of teachers from other classrooms to look at the work. So the process of I3, where we had the reflective practice group meetings where we're looking at various observations and classroom practices and then talking about those practices, is how the teachers were able to really grow through the professional development. And so they didn't feel that they were isolated, that sometimes the same problems that may be happening in one other room is the same as they're experiencing.
I think it has opened me as well, because in the past I would just do observations in the room. I would just choose the time, go in, observe, and then just give feedback. Having the time to really reflect, really meet with them and collaborate, and to discuss back and forth helps me to really see how they think about teaching, how they process it. And it gives me a better understanding of how to support them. In the beginning, I wasn't sure how to support them because all I would look at was what I seen when I observed. But I never had taken the time to really discuss what it was that they needed from me. So oftentimes I find myself saying now, how can I support you? Instead of just giving them the information, is more back and forth. So what do you need from me to help you do this? And so me facilitating has given me, I've taken on a different role overall. So I'm no longer just giving, but it's back and forth. So it's reciprocal. And I think it helps my relationship with the teachers as well, with them knowing that I'm willing to listen to what they have to say. And I think it makes them open to what I have to say as well. And so it changes the dynamics of the relationships that we have. And I think it helps make them better teachers, help me become a better supervisor. And it's not just like, I can't think of the word for it, but like constantly just giving them directives.
But what the lesson planning meeting has done is that sometimes they can get stuck. Or there's so many things thrown at them in early childhood, different standards, there's NACE, you got Head Start, we have class assessments, there's ECHRs, there's all sorts of things. So how do they sort of make sure on a weekly basis that they're looking at children's data, they're looking at where their children are at, figuring out what can they do to help children get to the next level, having a conversation together as a team, not like you're going to do lesson planning one week, I'll do it the second week, but that it's a team effort because we're working with the same group of children and we have different perspectives. And then also adding in the family piece.
So through the reflective practice group, through the coaching, looking at the observations, reviewing the data, then it helped us become more able to provide the kind of child caring practices we were hoping to achieve, the outcomes we wanted.
The next checkpoint, I saw growth in literacy, and it was because we focused on it. And so I see that when you are saying, let's focus on instruction, let's focus on children's learning, that teachers are able to do it, and then you can see the outcome in children. And it was so immediate that it was gratifying.
So right now, everyone's learning together, growing together. So the PD is much more effective than the traditional, I would say.
All right. So turn at your tables, and what I'd like you to do is talk about what did you hear these leaders say about the new ways that they approach professional learning and how they saw themselves in those relationships by being a different leader with their staff, all towards this goal of focusing on learning and children's development. All right, so we are, I feel like we're fast dating, right? Is it just me? Anybody feel like you're in a fast date with me? It's tough. Man, did I hear some beautiful insights. So I pre-planned this group to share out because I heard a snippet as I walked by. So what transformations did you hear that stood out to you?
We were talking about how oftentimes when leadership is coming to teachers, it's coming from the top down, and you feel like they're telling you what you need to do. And the shift that we were talking in our team is we want to feel like we're coming from the bottom up. We're supporting them, lifting and building them up. And in those videos, it looked to us like those teachers were feeling that shift, that collaboration and partnership. What was it you called it?
Shared ownership.
Shared ownership.
Ooh. How about that? So have you read the book?
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Did you practice? Because one of the most important impacts of strong, positive instructional leadership and strong professional community, ready, is a collective understanding of the vision and collective, say it with me, responsibility. We want people to be accountable, but you don't get to accountability without collective shared responsibility, right? That's what's motivating, right? A vision that's inspiring, a reason I went into the field. That inspires people, right? And then you bring them in community together, right? And together they empower each other. The whole autonomy piece is critical here. How many of you have been doing some reading in teacher leadership? Okay, so under collaborating teachers, guess what? All of the beautiful research on what happens when we look to galvanize leadership at every single level of our programs. And why is it okay to share leadership? Because if you're all collectively committed and collectively responsible, it's all going to be all right. It's going to be better than all right, right? Anything else you heard from those leaders? You could hear how some of it is still new, right? She's struggling for the words. They first wanted to edit that out, and I said, no. Leadership, learning to be an instructional leader, to develop those skills of facilitation, right? Of guidance, of coherently providing supports. It's a parallel process with our teachers and our children, isn't it? And so I wanted us to see that it's still a little new in her identity, right? But she gets there, doesn't she? She's like, yeah, I guess I was just given directives before. All right. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to, it's not on here. I'm telling you, I needed more organizational supports. But I have several URLs, links that I want to send you to. 2 of them are going to be briefs. They're not so brief. Prepare yourself. But they're not terribly long. One is 30 pages, but the font is 12, okay? And there's pictures. One is on reimagining instructional leadership and organizational conditions in early education improvement. Okay, that's the one you're going to dive into, get more in my head on this stuff, okay? I'll get them up. The other one is job-embedded professional learning, making it fit and feasible and effective in early ed, right? We're talking not well-resourced. These folks that you saw, these are all community-based child care leaders. They're blending every possible dollar in the state of Illinois and in the city of Chicago. And they made it possible. And that brief will tell you how they did it. Okay? And we'll also set up some conundrums. What are the pitfalls? What do you need to look out for when you're first heading down this path, right? And that'll be in that brief. And then the third one is very wonky. The third one is my measurement development work. Wouldn't you love to be able to measure, yes, right, in your programs? Their progress with strengthening themselves for improvement, right? This is not a gotcha. This is not a snapshot in time. This is together with their staff. How are they strengthening everyone's ability to implement those evidence-based practices that are actually very complex to implement, right? And so when we deeply respect that and we come back to it's in the discourse, it's in the social connections, the social capital, and in the words of that beautiful teacher, the love, right? How do we create those settings? And so the measurement tool will come prime time, July 2018. I got a beta version now if you're really interested.
Yes, we are.
But I'll put that URL up also, and you can see what are the measures on that teacher survey and on the parent survey. Thank you so very much for joining me today. Thank you.